Hello everyone, I am Manjul Sitaula. I am currently working as the research assistant at FOSSEE IIT Bombay under OpenFOAM category. And this training session on dynamic meshing strategies in OpenFOAM is prepared in collaboration with Dr. Chandan Bose, who is an assistant professor of aerospace engineering at University of Birmingham, UK. So the main references that we have taken for this tutorial is the OpenFOAM Wiki tutorials and the Dynamics website. So you can check out these websites. There are many more tutorials available for the dynamic mesh simulations. So the main agenda, presentation, uh, familiarize the use of dynamic meshes, the capabilities that are available in form, and how to use it. So the examples dynamic are morphing meshes, slices, and more to meshify. We will be focusing on mesh morphing session and also do tutorial. So this training aim for the two intermediate level open users, and the tutorial cases have been tested for the OpenCF versions in the version 2.10, 2.112, and also can be run in higher versions. But we need some certain changes in the keywords to be made to be able to run the foundation versions, that is the .org version. So you can post your queries in the chat box. So what are dynamic mesh? So in dynamic are the capabilities or that mesh to change during the simulation time. So anything that allows the mesh motion or the change of mesh, that might be either deformation of mesh or the movement of mesh, or might be dividing of mesh into other smaller parts. So these all comes under dynamic meshing, and this is done to accommodate the moving bodies or moving or deformations. So we can see the general transport equation, and in case of dynamic meshing, we need to include the mesh velocity. So this equation is shown just to separate the equation from the for the case of static mesh. So in static cases, we do not include the mesh velocity, and for dynamic cases, we need to include this velocity and discretize it accordingly in the moving parts of the mesh. So mesh morphing can be achieved through mesh morphing by adding or removing new cells, by sliding, or by overset meshes. So we'll come to this shortly. And dynamic meshes should be compatible with all the physical models and all solvers. So it should not be limited to any particular models and solvers. So why use dynamic mesh? If movement body, that is it. So wind dynamic is when they have to us. So whenever there is a prescribed body motion or a predefined body motion, when the boundary moves, or in cases of the 3D structure interaction or two-way coupling problems, or in cases where we require the mesh to refine or unrefine. So in such different cases, we need dynamic meshes. So here given the three different types of dynamic meshes. So the mesh morphing strategy, the adaptive mesh interface, and the adaptive mesh refinement are given here. So in mesh morphing, actually the physical deformation of mesh takes place. So the mesh will physically deform, the shape will change. But in AMI, we can see that there are two regions in being two regions that are separated by an interface region. So the rotating region and the static region. So we can also call this as the master region and the slave region. So in this interface between the static and the rotating mesh, there is the back-to-back interpolation. In order to find the solution, we need to interpolate between these two regions. So in the right hand side, we can see that the bubble rise simulation. So as John sir has already presented the adaptive mesh refinement technique. So we need to trace a variable. We need to trace a scalar. In this case, we are tracking alpha water at the interface, and we need to refine the mesh accordingly. So we are dividing the mesh into smaller divisions refining the mesh. So overset, so OpenFOAM that OpenCFD version, that .com version, has the overset mesh capability, which is not present in the foundation version. So in order to access this, we need, here is the given path. So it is located in the overset folder of the SRC folder. So these figures give us the physical perspective that how the same physics can be obtained or can be achieved by using three different mesh dynamic mesh strategies. So we can achieve the same
physical problem, we can approach the same physical problem using three different strategies. Like here we have used the AMI. In the center there is a mesh morphing, and in the right hand side there is overset mesh. So to be able to use AMI, we need the axial symmetry. So it should be axis symmetric, and we can divide this into two different regions. In mesh morphing, we can see the meshes are physically deforming. That is, the connectivity and the number of mesh do not change, but the shape and the motion and the movement, there is movement of the mesh in mesh morphing. Whereas in overset mesh, there are overlaid disconnected patches, disconnected component meshes, which can intersect each other, but they do not deform. So we can see that there is no deformation of mesh in the overset mesh. So in order to transfer the information of the boundary to the background meshes, there are interpolation methods or interpolation techniques that takes place in the overset mesh. So in order to use the dynamic meshes in OpenFOAM, we need to locate it in the constant folder. So, and we need to, in order to assign a prescribed body motion or a predefined motion, we need to assign the motion type to the surface patch, to a cell region, or to the whole domain. So the mesh motion, or the type of mesh motion function should be assigned either to a patch, cell region, or the whole domain. For adaptive mesh refinement, we need to define a refinement criteria based on a scalar field. So it might be a temperature, it might be alpha water. So at present there are also codes available where we can track based on runtime basis. So we can track the velocity gradient, which is a function of time, and then we can refine and unrefine the mesh based on the runtime basis as well. So the boundary condition for the wall should be kept as calculated or the moving wall velocity, which we will later see. So to find the solvers that work with dynamic meshes, we can type these commands. So we can go to the solvers folder and then grab this at .s file, so we can see that which solvers use dynamic mesh capabilities. And to see all the source code of the mesh motion libraries, we can go to these paths. So which we will later see in the demonstration. So there are two types of general. There are two types of motion functions. That is, one can be a predefined body motion. So when we have a predefined body motion, then we can use the motion solvers. But when you need to simulate a 3D structure interaction case or the two-way coupling problems, then we need to use the 62F rigid body motion. So dynamic meshes have strict stability and accuracy requirements, so which is to be considered. And there are instantaneous acceleration displacement taking place in the mesh due to the deforming boundaries, so we should also be taken care of. And the CFL number should also be monitored in mostly in AMR when we change from refinement level to refinement level. And it is extremely it's extremely important to monitor the current number, because the mesh will, when mesh deforms or when there is refinement in the mesh, then the CFL number will also change. So it is always recommended to keep it beyond the threshold value by adjusting the time steps and using adjustable time steps. So also the in morphing mesh, we need to monitor the mesh quality, because when the mesh deforms, is skewness is not non-orthogonality in the exchanges. So we should all keep this below the threshold value and monitor it during our simulation. And dynamic meshes are very unsteady and computationally expensive. So simply mesh morphing is the dynamic meshing strategy that involves the shape of the mesh to change. The connectivity or the connection of mesh do not change. The number of cells do not change, but the shape of the mesh will change. And mesh morphing can be achieved by either predefined functions given to the moving boundary, or can also be we can also input the using the table the displacement of the body or the angular displacement of the body as a function of time. So we need to also monitor the CFL number, because with large time steps or body involving large displacement, this will lead to the low quality meshes. So yeah, that's the point that we need to check the CFL number and the mesh quality while using mesh morphing. So oscillating cylinder. This is the case of the oscillating cylinder. So here we can see that the solvers that mesh motion library used is the dynamic motion solver FV and the motion solver is the lib FV motion solver .so. This is the library. And the motion solver you use is displacement Laplacian. So basically, there are two types of solver. Either it can be a displacement solver or a velocity solver. So if we compute the mesh displacement, then it can be called a displacement solver. And if we compute the velocity, then it can be referred to as a velocity solver. So the displacement of the mesh can also be done using the by solving different equations. So in displacement Laplacian, we solve the Laplacian equation. So we, in order to find the mesh displacement, we solve the Laplacian equation, and there are also other equations, that is the SBR stress equation. When the mesh movement involves large rotations, then we can use the SBR stress, that is the solid body rotation stress equations, and solve for the mesh displacement or mesh velocity. And the one thing to note is, while solving this Laplacian equation, we also need the deformation diffusivity. That is, and we need to assign, or we need to calculate this diffusivity. So here we can see that the coefficient of the diffusivity is calculated by the inverse distance method. And from where do we want to calculate the diffusivity is given here. That is the cylinder. So this is the patch name. So there are many solvers, and there are many mesh diffusivity types and the prescribed body motions that are available. We will see this shortly. So the cylinder, this is the patch name, and we have given the mesh motion function. So how does our cylinder move? How does this patch move? This is the we are given the type, the oscillating displacement. So it moves linearly as a sinusoidal function. So we have given the amplitude and omega, and this value is for the paraview. And we also need to assign moving or velocity to the moving boundary. And one thing to add is that we need to add the cell displacement in the FB solution. So how do we calculate cell displacement? The solvers for the cell displacement should be added in the FB solution. So you can see the mesh. This is the mesh morphing. So when the cylinder is oscillating, we can see that the shape of the mesh is changing, that the deformation of mesh going on. So we can also give the tabulated data as input. We need not to assign omega or any amplitude, but can also give the tabulated input based on our experiment. So if you have experimental data, then we can also feed that data in our constant as a .dat file, and can simulate our case. So by using that data, we can see how the simulation, how the cylinder is oscillating or moving. It is translating in both horizontal and vertical direction. So different diffusivity functions have different effect. So the diffusivity influences that the movement of the boundary to the internal mesh. So how much the movement of the boundary influences the internal mesh deformation is affected by this motion diffusivity. So we can see that the inverse distance just simply means that as the distance is increasing, we have smaller deformation, or diffusivity decreases in the as the distance increases. So we have also we cannot see the exponential inverse distance, and we have to assign the patch name, the moving boundary name. We can also define for the multiple geometries. So we can do for multiple oscillating cylinders and give a different prescribed motion to the cylinders. So either it can be same motion, or either it can be a different motion. So in this cylinder one, we have provided oscillating displacement in the y direction, whereas in the cylinder two, there is displacement in the x direction. So we can see that in these cases, in the right hand side figure, the cylinder is moving in horizontal and vertical direction. So one is moving in the vertical and the other is in the horizontal direction. We can do this just by giving different type of motion function. So this is the simulation of flapping airfoil, and we have assigned diffusivity as the quadratic inverse point distance. So you can also search which diffusivity method is best for your mesh, and according to your problem, you can change this diffusivity, and you can change the solver if you want to use velocity Laplacian or displacement Laplacian or displacement SBR stress solver. So according to your problem and your mesh, you can choose between these parameters. So the last one is the sixth law of motion. So whenever there is a fluid structure interaction, that is, the flow will induce the body structural deformation in the body, or the flow might induce the cylinder to move, or the body to move. In these cases, we need 6 to have body motion. So when the body is deforming due to the force of the fluid that is flowing over it. So in this case, if the body is deforming, we need a different solver to calculate or to accommodate the deforming body. But in this case, we can see that there is no deformation of the structure. There is only the oscillation of the structure due to the fluid force. So basically, we are solving the oscillation equation, that is mx double dot plus cx dot plus kx equals to a force, which is the force is the aerodynamic force or the fluid force. And we can see that the solver uses symplectic solver, so which solves for the oscillation equation. So we need two different solvers for the fluid flow as well as for the structural flow in 6-F motion. And also there are other parameters that should be included while while doing 6-F motion, like the mass of the moving body, that the structure mass of the structure, the moment of inertia, the constraints, restraints. So there are other parameters that also need to be addressed during using 6-F body motion. So that's all for the mesh morphing.